The discordant chime of a dropped champagne flute shattered the feigned serenity of Harborview Chapel. "You're marrying a viper, Veronica, a man who would dissect your heart for sport." The accusation, raw and venomous, clawed through the saccharine wedding music. Wesley Blackwood, resplendent in his tailored suit, a predator draped in civility, shot a glacial look towards the back of the chapel. Warren, his presence an anomaly in a borrowed, ill-fitting suit, a ghost scrubbed clean but still haunting the opulent gathering, stood near the entrance. Just moments before, 4 imposing naval officers, their white uniforms a stark, judgmental white against the chapel's muted tones, had materialized, their stance rigid, their eyes like chips of ice. Veronica's crimson veil, a shroud of her impending doom, couldn't conceal the tremor that ran through her. Her gaze darted from Wesley, whose smile was a predatory baring of teeth, to Warren, the enigma she'd fed for 3 soul-crushing years, never guessing the abyss of his past. "This is a nightmare," she choked out, the words a mere breath. 3 years prior, that same desperate whisper had been for a broken man huddled in the filth-strewn alley behind the Harbor Light Cafe. Veronica Sullivan's days began in the pre-dawn chill at 5 a.m., unlocking the cafe, her grandmother's legacy, now her gilded cage. By 7:25, an extra breakfast tray, a silent offering not on any customer's bill, was prepared with ritualistic precision. "Coming through!" she'd call to Vanessa, her assistant and reluctant confidant, as she navigated the swinging kitchen door, balancing a steaming plate of eggs, overcooked bacon, burnt toast, and bitter black coffee. At precisely 7:30 a.m., the cafe's back door creaked open, revealing a gaunt, bearded figure in rags. Warren's posture, even in ruin, held a chilling straightness, his eyes unnervingly alert, haunted by specters Veronica couldn't fathom. "Morning, Warren," she'd say, the plate an uneasy truce offering. He'd nod, a curt, dismissive gesture, taking it with a disturbing care. "Thank you." After 3 years, these were often their only currency. Yet, a terrifying aura clung to him, a sense that he'd once commanded, perhaps even destroyed. "Supposed to be a scorcher," she'd once offered, trying to breach the wall of his silence. Warren devoured the food with a methodical, almost predatory precision, a stark contrast to his dilapidated state. "The harbor fog will be a shroud till 9. Bad omen for the fishing boats." His predictions were uncannily accurate, as if he'd communed with the tormented sea itself. "Grandma always said the morning fog foretold a grim catch," Veronica mused aloud, the kitchen, her sanctuary, suddenly feeling cold. "Miss her every damn day, especially in this cursed kitchen." Warren merely nodded, his eyes, briefly meeting hers, held a flicker of something ancient and sorrowful. "She built a fortress here, a deceptive safe harbor." The bell at the cafe's front jingled, a jarring interruption. Vanessa poked her head out. "Veronica, some vulture in a suit, a developer, is asking for you." Veronica sighed, a gust of resignation. "Probably another circling hyena about those waterfront rezoning notices. Duty or damnation calls." Warren handed back the scraped-clean plate. "Thank you, Veronica. Same time tomorrow." The unspoken threat, "I'll be here." Veronica found a tall, impeccably dressed man, radiating an unnerving confidence, scrutinizing the faded photographs on her cafe wall. "Harbor Light's been bleeding history since '52, she stated, her voice betraying none of the tremor she felt. "If you're here to pick at its bones, I'm not selling." The man turned, a predatory smile gracing his lips, his eyes cold and calculating. "Wesley Blackwood," he announced, extending a hand that felt like a silken trap. "Blackwood Development, and I never begin a hostile takeover before coffee. Veronica Sullivan, and this isn't a negotiation, it's a refusal." Wesley's smile widened, a chilling sight. "Every conversation is a battlefield, Miss Sullivan, but I admire loyalty to a sinking ship. Perhaps I could order breakfast instead. I hear your blueberry pancakes are legendary in Port Haven." Despite the palpable threat he posed, a perverse flutter of something dark and dangerous stirred within Veronica. It had been 2 desolate years since her last disastrous entanglement, and though Wesley embodied everything that threatened her fragile existence, His sinister charm was a potent poison. "Pancakes I can do," she conceded, leading him to a window table, feeling like she was guiding a wolf into the sheep pen. While Veronica navigated the morning rush, a continent away, in a sterile naval intelligence office in Virginia, Commander Elise Reyes scowled at a flickering monitor. A seemingly innocuous social media post from Port Haven's annual Harbor Festival, a grotesque parade of forced merriment, showed a grainy photo. In the background, a bearded specter triggered a high-priority facial recognition alert. "Lieutenant!" she barked at her assistant, Victor Chen. "Bring me the Hayes file, now!" Victor produced a folder, its classified stamp a blood-red warning. "The missing seal." "That case has been a ghost for 3 years, Commander." Elise Reyes juxtaposed the social media photo with the stark military portrait in the file. The beard, the longer hair, the haunted eyes, they were a grotesque mask, but the bone structure was an undeniable match. "Maybe not anymore," she murmured, a thrill of the hunt in her voice. "Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes may have clawed his way back from the dead." Back in Port Haven, 6 agonizing months crawled by. Wesley became a fixture at Harbor Light, his presence a constant, unnerving pressure. Veronica, initially resistant, found herself ensnared by his ambitious, predatory confidence, a stark, terrifying contrast to her suffocatingly quiet life. One evening, as Veronica was wiping down counters, her movements jerky with suppressed anxiety, Vanessa nudged her, her eyes wide with alarm. "The developer devil is outside again. 3rd time this week he's come to collect you." Veronica peered through the grimy blinds. Wesley's ostentatious luxury car idled like a hearse at the curb. "He's not entirely monstrous once you get to know him." A lie, and she knew it. "He wants to raise half the waterfront and erect sterile monuments to his ego, Veronica," Vanessa countered, her voice sharp with warning. "He's reconsidering that plan," Veronica defended weakly, the lie tasting like ash. "Anyway, we're just becoming acquainted. While your pet phantom watches from the marina, his eyes burning holes in your back." Veronica flushed, a wave of guilt and something akin to fear washing over her. "Warren is not my anything. He's just a stray, someone who needs a handout, someone you never miss feeding, even when you're burning with fever," Vanessa pointed out, her gaze unwavering. "Someone whose eyes follow you like you're the last lifeboat on the Titanic." Before Veronica could retort, she spotted Warren across the street, a wraith collecting discarded cans. Even in his degradation, a chilling alertness clung to him, especially when he scanned the harbor as if searching for a lost soul, or perhaps a target. "He was somebody once," Veronica whispered, a cold dread gripping her. "I can feel it in my bones." Later that evening, Wesley escorted Veronica to the Lighthouse, Port Haven's most exclusive, ostentatious restaurant. "The cafe looked like a feeding frenzy today," he commented, his voice smooth as venom, as he refilled her wine glass, the crimson liquid sloshing dangerously. "Fridays always are. The fishing crews get paid, and everyone craves your grandmother's cloyingly sweet celebration pie." "You work yourself to the bone," Wesley said, his hand, cold and possessive, snaking across the table to capture hers. "Have you contemplated my generous offer further? A manager could handle the daily drudgery while you focus on, say, crafting a cookbook of those quaint family recipes." Veronica snatched her hand back as if burned. "The cafe isn't just about recipes, Wesley. It's about community, the connections." "Like your charity case?" Wesley's voice turned sharp, a razor's edge. "Warren. What about him? I've made inquiries. No one knows where the creature crawled from. Could be dangerous. A liability." Veronica straightened, her spine stiffening. "He's not dangerous. He's lost." "Your naivety is endearing, Veronica." His words were a silken threat, cut short by the waiter's ostentatious arrival with a silver-domed plate. "Dessert is served," the waiter announced with a theatrical flourish, removing the cover to reveal a velvet box nestled amongst a grotesque display of chocolate-dipped strawberries. Veronica's breath hitched as Wesley, with a predator's grace, slid from his chair to one knee. He opened the box, revealing a diamond ring so large it seemed to suck the light from the room, fracturing it into 1,000 cold, brilliant shards. "Veronica Sullivan, These past 6 months have shown me precisely what's been missing in my meticulously curated life. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Veronica stared at the ring, a glittering manacle, speechless. Through the restaurant window, a flicker of movement. Warren, lurching past in the driving rain, looking disoriented, one hand clamped to his head as if to keep his skull from splitting. As Wesley awaited her answer, his smile a fixed rictus, Warren stumbled, collapsing onto the slick sidewalk in what looked like a violent, uncontrolled seizure. "Warren!" Veronica gasped, leaping from the table, the chair crashing behind her. She bolted outside, leaving Wesley kneeling, the ring a cold weight in his hand, as rain began to soak through her expensive dress. Her choice made in a heartbeat of pure, unadulterated panic. "BP's plummeting! Get the crash cart now!" The emergency room exploded into a maelstrom of controlled chaos as Warren's body convulsed violently on the gurney. Veronica, drenched and shivering, pressed herself against the cold, sterile wall, a helpless spectator to the medical battle raging around him. "Ma'am, you need to wait outside," a stern-faced nurse instructed, her voice brooking no argument, guiding Veronica towards the desolate waiting area. Wesley stood there, a grim sentinel, his proposal dinner packed in funereal boxes, the velvet ring box a heavy accusation in his pocket. "Is he going to die?" Veronica asked, her voice a raw, broken whisper. The nurse's expression softened fractionally. "The doctor will update you. Are you family?" "No, I'm—" Veronica hesitated, the question a gaping wound. What was she to this broken man? "I'm his friend. He has no one else. No one." 6 harrowing hours later, Veronica slumped in an unforgiving hospital chair, her makeup a ruin, her hair plastered to her skull. Wesley returned from the cafeteria, a styrofoam cup of burnt-smelling coffee his only offering. "They've been in there an eternity," she murmured, her voice hoarse, accepting the cup with a shaking hand. Wesley's jaw was a clenched knot of resentment. "Veronica, it's almost midnight. We can check on this individual tomorrow." "I can't leave. Not until I know he's stable." "This isn't your burden to bear, Veronica." Wesley sat beside her, his hand reaching for hers, a cold, unwelcome touch. "I admire your misplaced compassion, but this man is a cipher, a ghost." Veronica pulled away, repulsed. "He's not a stranger. I've seen him every single day for 3 godforsaken years. Serving him scraps doesn't make him your responsibility, Veronica." Before she could unleash the torrent of her anger, Dr. Willow Martinez emerged, her face a mask of professional concern. "Miss Sullivan, your friend is stabilized. We took him for an emergency CT scan. There's something highly unusual you should see." In the doctor's dimly lit office, Veronica stared at the glowing images on the computer screen. A small, jagged, terrifyingly bright object was embedded deep within Warren's brain tissue. "Is that—" she began, her voice trembling. "Shrapnel," Dr. Martinez confirmed, her tone grave. "Consistent with a high-velocity impact, almost certainly an explosion. Given its location, it's a medical anomaly he's even functional. He's a walking time bomb." "He mumbled something about a construction accident once," Veronica said weakly, the lie feeling flimsy even to her own ears. Dr. Martinez looked skeptical, her eyes sharp. "This type of injury, Miss Sullivan, is more commonly seen in combat veterans." The fragment shifted, triggering the seizure. "We've stabilized him, but he needs immediate high-risk surgery to remove it." "Will he recover his memory?" Veronica asked, dread coiling in her stomach. The doctor tilted her head. "Memory loss? He doesn't seem to recall much about his past, just fractured, violent images. Traumatic brain injuries can induce profound amnesia. Removing the shrapnel might help, but there are absolutely no guarantees. It could even kill him." Later, Veronica stood at Warren's bedside. His face, scrubbed clean of street grime, looked younger, disturbingly familiar, yet alien. His hand twitched, then his eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with agonizing effort. "Veronica," he rasped, his voice like sandpaper. "I'm here," she assured him, her voice surprisingly steady. "You had a seizure. The doctors found metal in your brain, from an old, violent injury." Confusion, stark and terrifying, clouded his eyes. "I remember water. So much water from the rain tonight." He shook his head slightly, wincing in pain. No salt water, crashing waves. I think I was drowning, screaming. The door creaked open. Wesley entered, his expression a thundercloud of controlled fury. Warren's eyes flickered to him, then back to Veronica, a silent, desperate question in their depths. "You were at dinner," Warren stated, his voice flat. "With him." "I didn't mean to interrupt your life," he added, a bitter edge to his tone. "You didn't interrupt anything, Warren," Veronica said quickly, her heart pounding. Wesley stepped forward, his presence radiating menace. "Veronica, could I have a word? Privately." In the stark, unforgiving glare of the hospital corridor, Wesley seized both her hands, his grip like iron. "Veronica, I know tonight was unconventional, but my question, my proposal still stands." Veronica looked back towards Warren's room, her soul torn asunder. "He's receiving the care he needs," Wesley continued, his voice a low, insistent hum. "You've done more than most would dare. Now please." He withdrew the velvet box, the diamond winking malevolently under the fluorescent lights. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Under the harsh lights, Veronica stared at the diamond, Warren's fragmented words echoing in her mind. Water drowning, screaming, a life of torment. But here was Wesley, offering a gilded cage, a future of sterile certainty. "Yes," she whispered, the word a betrayal, as she allowed him to slip the ring, a cold shackle onto her finger. The next morning, Veronica returned to the hospital, a bag of cheap, fresh clothes for Warren clutched in her hand. The nurse directed her to his room. She found him sitting up, his gaze fixed on the distant, churning harbor. "How are you feeling?" she asked, the bag a pathetic offering on the bed. "Better." He turned, his eyes immediately snagging on the garish diamond on her left hand. A flicker of something unreadable recognition, then profound, chilling resignation crossed his face. "Congratulations." The word was a shard of ice. "Thank you," she mumbled, a flush of shame heating her cheeks. "I brought you some clothes. They're scheduling your surgery for next week." "You don't have to do this." His voice was stronger, laced with a newfound dangerous edge. "Do what?" "Take care of me. You have your own life now, Veronica, a future." "Warren, you've been a shadow at my cafe for 3 years. You're a part of my wretched life, too." He looked away, his profile stark and unforgiving. "I don't even know who or what I am. Maybe the surgery will dredge up those demons." 6 more months bled into eternity. Warren's surgery was a brutal success, though his memory remained a shattered, violent mosaic. With Veronica's reluctant, guilt-ridden help, he secured a squalid room near the marina and found sporadic work as a handyman, his innate, lethal skills hinting at a past drenched in military precision or covert operations. The enigma of his past festered, but a new, uneasy routine emerged. Veronica still brought him lunch, now at the decaying marina docks, a more public, yet somehow more clandestine ritual than the cafe's back door. Wesley's disapproval was a palpable, suffocating miasma, channeled into obsessive wedding preparations rather than direct, explosive confrontation. One blustery afternoon, Veronica found Warren meticulously repairing a rusted boat winch, his movements precise, economical, and terrifyingly confident. "Brought your favorite?" she said, her voice overly bright, holding up a bag containing a dry turkey sandwich and a slice of stale apple pie. Warren wiped his grease-stained hands on a filthy rag. "You shouldn't keep doing this, Veronica." "Doing what?" "Feeding a friend." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Your fiancé doesn't approve. He sees me as a threat." Veronica placed the bag on a splintered bench, her hand trembling. "Wesley doesn't get to dictate who my friends are." A lie. He dictated everything. Warren sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the distant gray silhouettes of naval ships. "The therapy, it's like picking at a festering wound. I remembered something new today, something violent." "What's that?" she asked, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "A storm, a monstrous one. Being on a ship, not a fishing boat. Something bigger, military, I think. And screaming, always the screaming." Veronica studied his hardened profile. "Doctor, Martinez mentioned your injury looked like it was from combat. It feels right, Warren admitted, his voice a low growl. When I see those warships, something primal, something violent, clicks. They ate in a strained, charged silence until Warren spoke again, his voice flat. The wedding. Soon. 2 months, Veronica confirmed, the words like stones in her mouth. Are you coming? I put your invitation in your mailbox. A cruel, thoughtless gesture. I don't think that's a good idea, Veronica. Why not? Warren turned to her, an unspoken torment in his eyes. Some things, some people are better left buried, Veronica. Before she could respond, her phone shrieked Wesley with some trivial, controlling query about cake tastings. As she answered, her voice falsely cheerful, Warren gathered his tools, his movements sharp and decisive, and returned to his work, the chasm between them widening into an unbridgeable abyss. In Virginia, Commander Elise Reyes, her face grim, briefed her elite, hardened team. Facial recognition is 98% certain. The probability of error is negligible. She informed the 4 naval officers assembled before her, their faces like stone. The man in Port Haven, the one they call Warren, is Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a man who looked like he'd wrestled demons and won, leaned forward. After 3 years? How in God's name is that possible? We saw him go overboard in that hellstorm. We believe he suffered a catastrophic traumatic brain injury during the storm that tore him from your team. The shrapnel embedded in his brain matches metal from the ship's compromised equipment, sabotaged equipment that broke loose during the incident. Chief Petty Officer Natalie Fan, her eyes narrowed in suspicion, studied the grainy surveillance photos. Does he remember who he is? What he did? Unknown, Reyes replied curtly. But hospital records, illegally obtained, indicate he recently underwent surgery to remove the shrapnel. His memory may be returning, and with it, the truth of that mission. Lieutenant Derek Santos frowned, a deep furrow in his brow. The mission details are still classified at the highest level. If he suddenly remembers exactly, that is our gravest concern, Reyes confirmed, her voice like ice. We need to make contact, secure him, before his memory fully returns without proper containment protocols in place, before he talks. Lieutenant James Collins, the youngest, most haunted member of the team, asked, his voice barely a whisper, "When do we deploy to Port Haven?" "Not yet," Reyes cautioned, her eyes glinting. "First, we need authorization. Hayes has been legally dead for 3 years. This requires delicate and discreet handling. We go in dark." That evening, Veronica met Wesley at Port Haven's most ostentatious jewelry store to select wedding bands, each choice another nail in her coffin. As the obsequious jeweler presented various platinum options, Wesley slipped a proprietary arm around her waist, his touch sending a shiver of revulsion down her spine. "I was thinking we could fly to Chicago next weekend," he suggested, his voice a silken command. "Scout neighborhoods, perhaps tour that penthouse I acquired." Veronica stiffened, the blood draining from her face. "Chicago? You never said anything about moving to Chicago after the wedding." "It's where the company headquarters is expanding, Veronica," Wesley explained, as if speaking to a recalcitrant child. "Besides, I assumed you'd be thrilled. The restaurant scene there is vibrant, perfect for developing your quaint little cookbook, perhaps franchising the Harbor Light brand once we've upgraded it." "What cookbook, Wesley? My life, my goddamn soul is here." "The cafe can be sold for a significant, almost obscene profit," he finished, his tone brooking no dissent, suggesting her attachment was a childish folly. "Veronica, you've been shackled to that decaying cafe since your grandmother's demise. Don't you want more? Something real?" The jeweler, sensing the escalating tension, discreetly vanished. Veronica pulled back from Wesley's suffocating embrace, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "That cafe is my heritage, Wesley." "My sanity. I never, ever said I wanted to leave it." Wesley's expression hardened, a mask of cold fury settling over his features. "We've discussed your untapped potential, Veronica, about moving beyond serving greasy fishermen and feeding strays. I thought you understood that marrying me meant ascending to a superior existence." "Feeding strays?" Veronica echoed, her voice trembling with rage. "You mean Warren?" "Him, and this pathetic, sentimental notion that your grandmother's dilapidated cafe is the only path for you." Wesley softened his tone, a calculated shift, reaching for her hand, his touch now a venomous caress. Veronica, I'm offering you the world. Chicago is merely the gateway. Veronica looked down at her engagement ring, the diamond now appearing as a cursed talisman, less a promise, more a price tag for her soul. I need air, she choked out, turning blindly towards the door. We can finalize this another time. Outside, thunder, a baleful omen, rumbled as storm clouds, black and bruised, gathered over the harbor. Veronica walked instinctively, a zombie drawn towards Harborlight Cafe, her sanctuary, her prison. As rain began to lash down, her phone buzzed repeatedly with Wesley's calls, each one an ignored, angry summons as she quickened her pace, desperate for escape. The cafe was closed, dark and foreboding, but Veronica's key, a familiar weight in her trembling hand, turned easily in the protesting lock. Inside, the cloying, familiar smells of stale coffee and burnt pastry enveloped her as lightning. A jagged, angry scar illuminated the empty space in brief, harsh flashes. She sank into a booth, the cheap vinyl cold against her skin, finally allowing the scalding tears to fall, tears of rage, of fear, of utter desolation. She didn't hear the tapping at first, mistaking it for the storm's angry drumming. Only when it grew more insistent, more urgent, did she look up to see Warren at the back door, a drenched, demonic figure, his expression terrifyingly urgent. When she fumbled the door open, he stalked inside, water streaming from his clothes, his presence filling the small space with a primal energy. Something about him was altered. His posture, straighter, more commanding, his eyes clearer, yet focused with a new, terrifying purpose. Warren, what in God's name is wrong? Veronica, he said, his voice steady, resonant, despite his dripping state. I know who I am. He paused, the silence crackling with unspoken menace. Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes, United States Navy SEAL. Service number 846,721 inches. Warren's voice was chillingly clear, almost mechanical, as if reciting words exhumed from a freshly dug grave. Lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating his face in stark, brutal relief. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, Veronica saw him as he must have been, confident, commanding, lethal, whole. You remembered, she whispered, her hand seemingly of its own volition, reaching for a tattered towel behind the counter, offering it to him like a ward against evil. Not everything. Warren raked the towel over his face and hair, his movements sharp, economical. It's still clawing its way out, in pieces. The storm, it triggered something, like the night of my seizure, a cascade of violent images. Veronica gestured numbly towards a booth. Sit, I'll make coffee. As the acrid coffee brewed, Veronica watched Warren through the kitchen pass through, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. His posture had transformed. Military straight, even in his soaked civilian rags. How had she been so blind? The way he scanned rooms upon entering, his predatory grace, his uncanny, almost supernatural ability to predict weather patterns. Cream. No sugar, she said, her voice a strained whisper, setting the mug before him. Just like always. Warren looked up, surprise, then a flicker of something dark and dangerous, crossing his features. How did you know that's how I take my coffee? 3 years of breakfasts, Warren. A sad, twisted smile touched her lips. Or should I call you Commander Hayes now? Warren is sufficient. He cupped the mug with both hands, his knuckles white. Veronica, I need to tell you what I remember. What I did. I'm listening, she said, a sense of impending doom settling over her. I was on a classified mission, deniable ops. There was a storm, a maelstrom, worse than anything I'd seen in 15 years of service. Part of the ship's specialized equipment, critical, broke loose. I went to secure it. He pressed a hand to his temple, his face contorting in a spasm of remembered pain. Something hit me, an explosion, then water, so much water, cold, dark, screaming. You were thrown overboard, Veronica realized, the words catching in her throat. Warren nodded, his eyes hollow. I must have washed ashore, miles from our target location. No identification. Severe head trauma. A ghost. His voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken horrors. 3 years, Veronica. My team, my unit, they undoubtedly think I'm dead. Or worse, a traitor. Veronica reached across the table, her hand cold and trembling, covering his. The diamond on her finger, Wesley's brand, caught the light from another lightning flash, a grotesque mockery. Warren's eyes fixed on it, his expression turning to stone. "You're getting married," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, flat and dead. "In 2 months." Veronica snatched her hand back as if scalded, suddenly, acutely self-conscious. "Wesley Blackwood, he seems successful. He wants me to sell the cafe, move to Chicago after the wedding, erase my past." Warren's expression darkened, his eyes like chips of obsidian. "And what do you want, Veronica?" Before Veronica could dredge up an answer from the depths of her terror, her phone shrieked again. "Wesley!" She silenced it without looking, her hand shaking. "I should go," Warren said, his voice a low growl as he rose, a caged animal. I needed to tell someone who knew the ghost, what I remembered. You're the only one who's been a constant in this hell these past 3 years." As he moved towards the door, a wraith about to be swallowed by the storm, Veronica called after him, her voice raw with desperation. "What will you do now?" Warren paused, his hand on the doorknob, his silhouette a dark omen against the raging storm. "Find out if I'm still considered alive, for starters, or if I'm a hunted man." And then he looked back at her, an unspoken, terrifying promise in his gaze. "Then, I guess I'll remember who I was supposed to be, and what I was supposed to do." After he vanished into the tempest, Veronica stared at the ring on her finger, no longer seeing the gilded future Wesley had painted, but instead feeling the crushing weight of a damnation she'd never agreed to. The next morning, Veronica arrived at the cafe before dawn, her night a torment of restless dreams, of stormy seas, drowning men, and accusing eyes. Vanessa found her aggressively, almost violently, kneading dough, flour coating her like a shroud. "That bread dough insult your honor personally?" Vanessa asked, her voice laced with concern as she tied on her apron. "Couldn't sleep?" Veronica admitted, her voice rough. "Wedding jitters. Or has the ghost of Christmas past come calling?" Veronica paused, her hands stilled in the dough, her knuckles white. "Wesley, he wants to move to Chicago after the wedding, sell the cafe, liquidate my life." Vanessa's eyes widened in alarm. "And you're just now processing this ultimatum?" "He sprung it on me yesterday. Said he thought I understood that marrying him meant stepping into a bigger, better life. His life." "What in God's name does that even mean?" Vanessa demanded. "Apparently it means obliterating everything I've built here, everything Grandma bled for." Veronica pounded the dough again, a violent, futile gesture. "Everything she sacrificed to keep me safe." Vanessa studied her friend, her expression a mixture of pity and exasperation. "And what about Warren, the newly resurrected SEAL? Did you tell him you're abandoning ship?" Veronica hesitated, her face pale. "Warren, he remembered who he is. He's a Navy SEAL, or was. He thinks his team believes he's dead. Or worse." "Whoa." Vanessa breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Special Forces. Black Ops. That explains a lot. The darkness around him." "Like what?" Veronica asked, though a cold dread was already seeping into her bones. "The way he moves. Like a predator. How he's always aware of exits, threats. The fact that he survived 3 goddamn years with a piece of shrapnel, a ticking time bomb in his brain. Men like that don't just get amnesia, Veronica. They're made to forget." Veronica hadn't considered these terrifying details, but they aligned perfectly, chillingly, with what Warren had remembered. "He came to tell me last night, during the storm, and then nothing. He just vanished. I'm engaged to Wesley. Trapped." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her skepticism a palpable force. "Are you trying to convince me, Veronica, or yourself?" Before Veronica could answer, the bell over the door jingled, a death knell. Wesley entered, impeccably dressed despite the ungodly hour, a ridiculously large bouquet of blood-red roses in his hand, an offering to a condemned woman. "Veronica," he began, his voice a silken threat as he approached the counter. "About last night." "I'm working, Wesley," Veronica interrupted, her voice flat, refusing to meet his cold, calculating eyes. "I know, and I apologize for surprising you with the Chicago relocation, but we need to finalize the logistics." He set the roses on the counter, their thorns prominent. Vanessa pointedly and wisely busied herself with the coffee machine as Grace finally looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate, trapped defiance. "There's nothing to discuss, Wesley. I'm not selling the cafe, and I'm not moving to Chicago. Not now, not ever." Wesley's smile tightened, a predatory baring of teeth. "Let's not make rash, emotional decisions in anger, Veronica. The cafe is quaint. I understand its sentimental value, but your talents, your potential are wasted here. In Chicago, you could have your own restaurant empire, not just this relic." He glanced around dismissively, his contempt a palpable insult. "This what?" Veronica challenged, her hands stilling in the dough, her voice dangerously low. Wesley, sensing he'd overplayed his hand, smoothly amended, "This charming but ultimately limited space. Think bigger, Veronica. Think about our future, the Blackwood legacy." "I have been thinking about our future, Wesley," she said quietly, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "And I'm no longer sure we want the same things, or that I want to be a part of yours." Something shifted in Wesley's expression, a flicker of concern, quickly masked by cold calculation. He reached across the counter, his fingers like tendrils, attempting to ensnare her flower-covered hand. "I love you, Veronica. We'll recalibrate. This is merely a minor setback." 2 months before the scheduled wedding, a lifetime away, Warren stood on the marina dock, a solitary, menacing figure watching the naval vessels in the distance, their silhouettes disturbingly familiar, triggering violent, fragmented memories. Training exercises that bordered on torture, covert missions in hostile, blood-soaked foreign waters, the faces of men and women he'd served with, fought with, bled with ghosts from a past he was only beginning to exhume. "Beautiful, deadly ships," a voice, cold and authoritative, commented beside him. Warren turned, his body instantly tensing, to find a woman in nondescript civilian clothes, her bearing unmistakably, chillingly military. "Commander Elise Reyes," she introduced herself, her eyes like chips of ice, offering a badge that screamed naval intelligence. Warren straightened instinctively, his training buried deep, snapping to the surface. "You know who I am." "Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes," she confirmed, her voice devoid of warmth. "Presumed killed in action 3 years ago during Operation Silent Tide, a mission that went catastrophically wrong. My team, did they all survive the fallout? They'll be relieved to know you didn't betray them, as some suspected, that you too survived the initial event." Warren looked back at the churning gray water, his face a mask of torment. "I'm not sure survived is the right word, Commander. I've been a ghost, a hunted man in my own mind. A ghost who's been receiving clandestine medical care and forming local attachments," Reyes noted, her gaze sharp and penetrating. "Like Veronica Sullivan." Warren tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Leave her out of this. She's an innocent." "Relax, Commander. We're grateful to Miss Sullivan. According to your illegally acquired neurologist's report, her consistent, albeit naive, interaction with you likely preserved crucial neural pathways that facilitated your partial memory recovery. She had no idea who or what she was harboring, which makes her kindness all the more exploitable." Reyes handed him a thick, ominous folder. "Your service record. It might help fill in some of the more problematic blanks." Warren accepted it hesitantly, the weight of it a physical burden. "Why are you really here, Commander? I doubt it's just to welcome me back to the land of the living with open arms." "Perceptive as your file suggested," Reyes acknowledged, a hint of a predatory smile touching her lips. "Operation Silent Tide remains classified at the highest, most sensitive level. As your memory returns, certain protocols must be rigorously followed. Your knowledge is a dangerous weapon, Commander. Additionally, your team, they've never stopped searching for answers about that night, about what really happened, about who was responsible for the sabotage." "My team, they're still active?" After what we went through? Reyes nodded, her eyes cold. Lieutenants Webb, Santos, Collins, and Chief Fan. They continued after a brief mandatory leave. They've been informed of your survival, but not your location, not yet. That is your choice to make, or ours, if you prove uncooperative. Warren stared at the folder in his hands, the weight of his former life, his former sins, threatening to crush him. I need time to process this, to understand what they'll do to me. Take it, Reyes advised, her voice like steel. But don't take too long, Commander. You've been legally dead for 3 years. Reclaiming your identity, or having it reclaimed for you, involves significant and potentially dangerous bureaucracy. There are those who would prefer you remained a ghost. After Reyes departed, a phantom melting back into the shadows, Warren returned to his squalid room, the air thick with the smell of mildew and despair. He opened the folder. Photos of his team, his brothers and sister in arms, stared back at him, their faces triggering a cascade of violent, fragmented memories of camaraderie forged in blood and fire. Service records detailed missions he'd commanded, commendations he'd earned, betrayals he'd suffered. A sharp, insistent knock at his door shattered his concentration. Veronica stood outside, a container clutched in her hand like a peace offering, her face pale and drawn. "Lunch," she explained, her voice strained, though I wasn't sure if Navy SEALs eat the same meager sandwiches as handymen. Warren stepped aside, a silent, grudging invitation to enter his hovel. "How did you know I'd be here and not at the docks?" "Vanessa, she saw you, with a woman in a severe pantsuit, said you both looked intense, like predators sizing each other up." "Naval intelligence," Warren confirmed, his voice flat, confirming my problematic identity. Veronica nodded, her gaze falling on the open, damning folder. "Your team?" "Yes. They survived the mission, the one that broke me. They didn't know I did too, or if I was a traitor. Will you contact them? Or will they hunt you down?" Warren sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "I don't know. The man they knew, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, I'm not sure that's who or what I am anymore. He might be a monster." Veronica set the container on his small, rickety table, the offering seeming pitiful in the face of his torment. "Maybe not entirely, but he's a part of you, a dangerous part, just like the Warren I've known, the broken man, is part of you." Her engagement ring, Wesley's brand, caught the dim light, a constant, glaring reminder of the future she was shackled to, a future that was rapidly unraveling. Warren looked away, his jaw tight. "Wesley. He came by the cafe this morning," Veronica said, her voice barely a whisper, watching his reaction like a hawk. "Making wedding plans?" Warren's tone was carefully, dangerously neutral. "Trying to convince me to move to Chicago, to liquidate my life." Warren's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with a sudden, fierce intensity. "Chicago? He wants me to sell the cafe, start fresh, somewhere else." Veronica's voice wavered, then hardened with a desperate defiance. "Be someone else, I think. Someone acceptable to him." "And what do you want, Veronica?" It was the same damn question he'd asked that night in the cafe, a question that echoed in the desolate chambers of her heart. This time, Veronica answered, her voice a raw, desperate cry. "I want to honor my grandmother's legacy. I want to keep feeding the fishing crews and the lost souls who depend on harbor light. It's the only thing that keeps me sane." She paused, her breath catching in her throat. "And I want to know I'm marrying someone who sees me, not some idealized version they want to mold me into, someone who doesn't want to own me." The space between them crackled with unspoken, dangerous possibilities. Warren took a hesitant step toward her, his hand outstretched, then stopped himself, his face a mask of torment. "Veronica." Before he could continue, her phone chimed, a shrill, mocking wedding planner notification. The moment shattered, reality, cold and unforgiving, reasserting itself. "I should go," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "Cake tasting with Wesley." After she fled, Warren stared at the photos of his team again. These people had mourned him, cursed him, continued without him. His decision to contact them or be hunted by them wasn't just about reclaiming his past. It was about choosing his future, a future that seemed irrevocably stained with blood and betrayal. That night, a ferocious storm, a mirror of the tempest in his soul, rolled in from the sea, less intense than the one that had almost claimed his life, but enough to rip Warren from his restless, tormented sleep. In the suffocating darkness of his room, more memories, sharper, more brutal, surfaced. The mission details, the classified, illegal nature of their operation, the last horrifying moments before he was swept overboard, betrayed, left for dead. He'd been responsible for those 4 people in the photographs, responsible for their survival, and perhaps their damnation. They deserved to know he was alive. They deserved to know the truth. With a sudden, chilling clarity, Warren reached for his burner phone and composed a terse, coded message to the contact number Elise Reyes had provided, a number that felt like a leash. "This is Hayes. I'm ready to meet my team. On my terms." Across town, Veronica lay awake beside Wesley in his opulent, sterile condo, the silence a suffocating shroud. She listened to the rain lashing against the windows, thinking of stormy seas, drowning men, and lost sailors trying to find their way home, or to exact revenge. The wedding was 2 months away, a death sentence, but the distance between her and her fiancé stretched far wider than the cold expanse of their bed. As Wesley slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of the inferno raging within her, Veronica slipped from beneath the covers, a ghost in her own life. She stood at the window, watching the harbor lights blinking like malevolent eyes through the rain. She thought of Warren, Commander Hayes, the dangerous life he was beginning to remember, a life of purpose, of service, of violence. Looking back at Wesley, a man she was beginning to despise, she wondered what life she was choosing for herself, and whether the security he offered, the gilded cage, was worth the sacrifice of her very soul. "No, Wesley." Veronica's voice, sharp as shattered glass, echoed in the empty tomb-like cafe after closing time. "For the last goddamn time, I'm not selling Harbor Light. I'm not selling my soul." Wesley paced before the counter like a caged tiger, his patience, always a thin veneer, visibly shredding. "Be reasonable, Veronica. This is an ultimatum. I've arranged meetings with 3 aggressive potential buyers next week, all offering well above market value, generous considering. Without consulting me? Without my consent?" Veronica slammed the cash register drawer closed with such force it rattled the very foundations of the cafe. "This place isn't just property to be flipped, you arrogant bastard. It's my heritage. It's all I have left." "It's a failing business, Veronica," Wesley countered, his voice rising to a dangerous snarl. "A small, insignificant one with limited growth potential in a decaying, seasonal tourist trap. The Chicago opportunity, my opportunity, won't wait forever." "And neither will I!" Veronica wiped down the counter with sharp, angry, furious motions. "Then maybe you should go without me, Wesley. Go to hell!" Wesley stopped pacing, his expression hardening into a mask of cold, calculating fury. "What's really going on here, Veronica? Is this truly about this pathetic cafe? Or is it about your homeless project, your stray dog who miraculously turns out to be some kind of war hero, or a war criminal?" Veronica froze, the blood draining from her face. "Warren has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't he?" Wesley challenged, his voice a venomous hiss. "You've been distant, cold, ever since his miraculous memory recovery. Vanessa, your little spy, mentioned you still bring him lunch every day, like a devoted, pathetic lapdog." "He's my friend," she choked out, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "He's more than that," Wesley challenged, his eyes glittering with a dangerous, possessive light. "I see how you look at him, Veronica, how you've always looked at him, like he's some kind of dark savior." Outside, thunder rumbled, a chorus to their escalating conflict, as another storm, blacker and more violent, approached the harbor. Veronica tossed the cleaning cloth into the sink as if it were contaminated. "I think you should leave, Wesley. Now." "Grace?" He spat her name, but it was a slip, a tell. He was thinking of someone else, some other conquest. "Now, Wesley, I need space to think. To breathe." After he departed, his angry footsteps echoing like gunshots, Veronica locked the cafe, the bolts sliding home with a dreadful finality. She climbed the narrow, creaking stairs to her small, claustrophobic apartment above. Rain began lashing against the windows, a furious, relentless assault, as she sank onto her threadbare sofa, staring at the engagement ring, Wesley's brand, that felt increasingly like a shackle, a noose. Across town, at the decaying marina, Warren huddled in the dilapidated, leaking boathouse as the storm intensified, its fury a reflection of his own inner turmoil. Each lightning flash, each thunderclap brought sharper, more violent memory fragments. The mission, the team, the classified illegal operation to intercept a weapons shipment, disguised as humanitarian aid, destined for insurgents. The final, horrifying piece clicked into place during a particularly violent, deafening thunderclap. Warren gasped, his body arching in agony as the complete, unvarnished memory of that night, of the betrayal, returned with brutal, devastating clarity. Securing the loose, sabotaged equipment during the storm, the blinding impact that sent him careening overboard, the freezing, suffocating water, the encroaching darkness, the screams his own and those of his men. His burner phone buzzed, a venomous insect with a text from Commander Elise Reyes. Team arriving tomorrow, 0900 hours, Naval Support Facility Pier 7, no deviations. No mistakes. Warren stared at the message, a maelstrom of anxiety, rage, and a desperate primal anticipation churning within him. After 3 years, he would face the teammates who had mourned him, perhaps cursed him, continued without him. Would they recognize the broken, haunted man he'd become? Did he even recognize himself? Or would they see a traitor, a target? Unable to remain confined, a caged animal, Warren stepped out into the raging storm. Rain soaked through his thin jacket instantly, plastering his hair to his skull as he walked instinctively, a moth to a flickering, dangerous flame, toward harbor light. Through the cafe windows, streaked with rain and grime, he could see it was closed, dark, and lifeless. But a single, defiant light shone in the apartment above. Warren hesitated at the side entrance, the door a flimsy barrier to Veronica's apartment. She was engaged to Wesley, planning a wedding, preparing for a life, a gilded damnation that didn't include him. Yet, something dark, something irresistible, pulled him forward. He climbed the stairs, his wet boots echoing ominously on the worn wood, and knocked, the sound like a gunshot in the storm-lashed silence. Veronica opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise, then instantly clouding with a desperate concern at his drenched, demonic appearance. "Warren! What in God's name are you doing out in this maelstrom?" "I remembered everything," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, water dripping from him onto her worn welcome mat, forming a dark, spreading pool. The mission, the betrayal, how I ended up here, why they left me for dead. "All of it," she whispered, her voice trembling. She stepped aside, a silent, fearful invitation. "Come in before you catch your death, or bring it to my door." Inside, Warren stood awkwardly, a dripping, menacing specter, until Veronica, her hands shaking, handed him a towel. "My team, they're coming tomorrow," he explained, his voice raw as he roughly dried his face. "After 3 years thinking I was dead, or a traitor they needed to silence." "That's good, isn't it?" Veronica asked, her voice barely audible, keeping a careful, fearful distance between them. "I don't know." Warren ran a hand through his wet hair, his eyes blazing with a wild, untamed light. The man they knew he'd died that night, in the storm, sacrificed. "I'm not sure who or what I am now." "You're still you," Veronica said softly, her voice a fragile thread in the raging storm, just with more pieces of yourself, dangerous pieces, recovered. Warren looked around her small, cluttered apartment, filled with faded photographs and sentimental knickknacks, a suffocating tapestry of a life he could never have, a life he would inevitably destroy. So different from his sparse, squalid room at the marina, a monk's cell, a prisoner's cage. "I shouldn't have come," he said suddenly, his voice harsh. "You're getting married, moving to Chicago, to your gilded cage." "I haven't agreed to Chicago," Veronica corrected, her voice tight with unshed tears and unspoken fears. "But you're still marrying him? Still shackling yourself to that viper?" The question hung between them, a live, pulsating thing, unanswered. Lightning illuminated the room in stark, brutal flashes, throwing their elongated, distorted shadows against the wall like grotesque, wrestling demons. "Why did you really come here tonight, Warren?" He met her gaze, something shifting, breaking in his expression. "Because you're the only constant, the only anchor in my life these past 3 goddamn years. Even when I didn't know my own name, my own sins, I knew you'd be at that cafe door at 7:30 every morning. A lifeline, or a condemnation." Veronica stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible, dangerous force. "And now I know who I was," Warren said quietly, his voice laced with a profound, chilling sorrow. "A weapon, but I'm still figuring out who or what I am, or what I'm capable of." Veronica moved closer still, so close she could see the flecks of gold like dying embers in his haunted brown eyes. "When I look at you, I've always seen the same person, lost or found, damned or redeemed, someone honorable, someone who matters to me." Warren's hand, scarred and trembling, rose to her cheek, hesitating for an eternity before making contact, his touch sending a jolt like a live wire through her. The storm around them seemed to fade into a dull, distant roar as they stood frozen in the moment, 2 souls teetering on the precipice of an abyss. "Veronica," he whispered, his voice rough with a raw, desperate emotion. She leaned toward him slightly, her eyes drifting closed, a moth drawn to a consuming flame. Their lips were inches apart, the air crackling with a dangerous, forbidden electricity, when her phone rang shrilly, a piercing, brutal shriek, shattering the moment, shattering them. Veronica stepped back as if burned, her eyes flying open, glancing at the caller ID, her face paling. "It's Wesley," she said, her voice a choked whisper, not answering. Warren retreated toward the door, his face a mask of cold, hard resolve. "I should go." "Warren, your fiancé is calling, Veronica," he said firmly, his voice like steel. "Answer it. Figure out what you really want, who you really want, before the wedding, before it's too late, for your sake, not mine." Before she could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the storm, leaving her alone with the ringing phone and the ruins of her life. The next morning dawned deceptively clear, the sky washed clean by the night's tempest. Warren stood at rigid attention on Pier 7, dressed in ill-fitting clothes provided by Commander Reyes. Not a uniform, but close enough to feel like a shroud or a target. At precisely 0900 hours, a black, unmarked naval vehicle, silent and menacing, pulled up. 4 figures, shadows in the harsh morning light, emerged, pausing when they spotted Warren, their expressions unreadable, dangerous. Even at a distance, he recognized them. Marcus Webb, Derek Santos, James Collins, and Natalie Fan, his team, his family, his executioners, his... For a long, agonizing moment, no one moved. The silence stretched taut, humming with unspoken accusations and the threat of violence. Then Marcus, his face a grim, unyielding mask, stepped forward, his pace increasing until he was almost running, his hand hovering near the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. He stopped just short of Warren, his expression a volatile cocktail of disbelief, rage, and a flicker of something that might have been hope. "Hayes?" His voice cracked, a fissure in his stony facade. "Is it really you? Or a ghost sent to haunt us?" Warren nodded, emotion raw and savage, tightening his throat, making speech impossible. "It's me, Webb, or what's left of me, what they made of me." Marcus grabbed him in a fierce, brutal embrace, an assertion of dominance, a test of strength, followed quickly by the others, their touches less embrace, more appraisal. Their questions, sharp and accusatory, tumbled over each other. Where had he been? How had he survived the unsurvivable? Why hadn't he contacted them? Was he a traitor, a deserter? Commander Reyes, a silent, observant predator, gave them a modicum of privacy, walking to the end of the pier, her eyes never leaving them, as Warren, his voice hoarse and strained, explained his amnesia, the shrapnel, the years living as a ghost, a homeless man with no identity, no past, hunted by his own fragmented memories. "We looked for you for weeks, Hayes," Natalie said, her voice devoid of tears, her eyes hard and unforgiving. "The official search and rescue teams gave up, Declared you KIA, but we didn't. Not really. We hunted for you. For answers. For revenge. The mission? Warren asked, his voice a raw whisper. The one they sent us on. The one that was a setup. Completed by another team, Derek explained, his voice flat, his eyes cold. A cleanup crew. But it was never the same without you, Hayes. Without your particular skills. Young James Collins, who had been a terrified rookie on that fateful, doomed mission, studied Warren intently, his eyes filled with a chilling maturity. You really didn't remember anything? For 3 years? Not even what they made you do? Just fragments, Warren confirmed, his voice barely audible. Violent, bloody fragments. Until recently. What or who made you start remembering? Marcus asked, his gaze sharp, probing, suspicious. Warren hesitated, the name a brand on his tongue. A woman, Veronica. She runs a cafe here. Fed me every morning for 3 years, without knowing who or what I was. An act of kindness. Or foolishness. Understanding, cold and pragmatic, passed between the seasoned, hardened team members. Where is she now? Natalie asked, her voice deceptively gentle. We should thank her, or silence her. She's engaged, Warren said flatly, his voice a gravelly rasp. Getting married in 6 weeks to a man who will destroy her. His tone conveyed more than his words, a raw, possessive fury, and his team exchanged knowing, predatory glances. Hayes, Marcus began carefully, his voice a low warning. What are your plans now? Reyes says your status can be officially changed from KIA to active duty, or something else. Once the paperwork, the debriefing clears. If it clears. The question caught Warren off guard, a punch to the gut. He hadn't thought beyond this terrifying, volatile reunion. I don't know, he admitted, his voice raw with uncertainty. I'm not sure I can go back to who I was, to what I was. None of us are who we were 3 years ago, Hayes, Derek pointed out, his voice like granite. War changes you. Betrayal, it breaks you. But the team, it has a spot for you. If you want it. If you can still be trusted. Warren looked out at the churning gray harbor, thinking of Veronica's cafe, her desperate kindness, the almost kiss, the inferno, during the storm. I need time, to think, to decide if I'm a savior or a destroyer. As they walked along the pier, a silent, menacing pack, their shared history a palpable, dangerous bond, Warren spotted a familiar figure approaching, hesitant, vulnerable. Veronica, carrying her cafe's branded takeout bag, an offering to the damned. His team noticed his distraction, their heads swiveling in unison, their gazes instantly assessing, predatory. Is that her? Natalie asked quietly, her voice a silken threat. Warren nodded, tension, sharp and coiling, visible in his stance. Veronica faltered when she saw the group, her eyes widening in alarm, clearly not expecting Warren to have company, armed company. She considered turning back, fleeing, but Warren had already seen her, his gaze a possessive, unwavering lock. She approached hesitantly, a lamb to the slaughter. I brought lunch, she explained, her voice trembling, holding up the bag as if it were a shield. Habit, I guess. A stupid, dangerous habit. Warren made the introductions, his voice curt, strained, watching as his team appraised Veronica, their thanks, if any, laced with suspicion, their eyes hard and calculating. She seemed overwhelmed, terrified by their barely concealed menace. I just fed him breakfast, she protested, her voice a fragile whisper. Anyone would have done the same. No, Marcus said firmly, his voice a low growl, his eyes never leaving hers. They wouldn't have. Not for 3 years. Not without a reason. What's your reason, Miss Sullivan? James, his eyes cold and knowing, noticed the glittering engagement ring on Veronica's finger. A brand, a betrayal, but said nothing, though his pointed, contemptuous glance at Warren spoke volumes. We were about to acquire sustenance ourselves, Natalie suggested, her voice deceptively smooth, a predator sizing up its prey. Would you join us, Veronica? We'd love to hear more about Harbor Light Cafe, and about your relationship with our commander. Before Veronica could stammer out a refusal, a sleek black car, silent as a shark, pulled up to the pier's entrance. Wesley emerged, his face a mask of cold, possessive fury, spotting the group and approaching with the confident, arrogant stride of a man who owned the world and everyone in it. "Veronica!" he called, his voice sharp, a whip crack. "I've been looking everywhere for you. We have the venue walkthrough in 30 minutes. The wedding waits for no one." The fragile, dangerous atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. Warren's team instinctively, subtly closed ranks around him, their protective or perhaps possessive, instincts flaring, their bodies radiating a silent, lethal threat. I forgot about the walkthrough," Veronica admitted, her voice barely audible, her face pale with dread. "I was just dropping off lunch for Warren and his friends." Wesley's gaze, cold and contemptuous, swept over the military group, dismissing them as insignificant. "I see. Well, we need to go. The wedding planner is waiting, and I don't like to be kept waiting." The emphasis on wedding wasn't subtle. It was a brand, a claim. Veronica looked torn, her gaze darting frantically between Warren, a dark, dangerous unknown, and Wesley, a known, suffocating torment. "Go," Warren said quietly, his voice a low growl, his eyes burning into hers. "It's important." Veronica handed the lunch bag to Natalie, her hand trembling. "It was wonderful to meet you all." As she walked towards Wesley, a prisoner being led to her execution, he placed a possessive, bruising arm around her waist, guiding her, almost dragging her to his car. Before getting in, Veronica looked back once, her expression a maelstrom of conflict, of fear, of desperate, silent appeal. After they departed, a screech of tires punctuating their exit, Warren's team remained silent for a long, charged moment. "So that's the fiancé," Marcus finally commented, his voice laced with contempt. "A real charmer." "Seems like a liability," Derek added, his tone pure, unadulterated sarcasm. Warren changed the subject, his voice harsh, abrupt. "Tell me more about what the team's been doing, who we've been hunting." Later that evening, after his team had returned to their sterile, anonymous hotel with ominous plans to meet again the next day, Warren sat alone on a cold, windswept harbor bench, a solitary, brooding figure. Commander Elise Reyes materialized beside him, a phantom in the encroaching darkness, her presence as unsettling as the churning black water. "Your team seems pleased to have you back," she noted, her voice a silken whisper, sitting beside him, too close for comfort. "They want me to rejoin," Warren said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "once my status is officially changed, sanitized." "And will you, Commander? Or will you become a loose end we need to tie up?" Warren sighed, a sound of profound, soul-deep weariness. 3 years ago there would have been no question, no hesitation. Now there's Veronica Sullivan, Reyes finished, her voice laced with a dangerous, knowing amusement. "She's engaged to a powerful, influential man, yet she brings you scraps of food every day and looks at you like you're the only demon she's ever wanted to dance with." Warren glanced at her, his eyes narrowed in surprise and suspicion. "I'm naval intelligence, Hayes. Reading people, exploiting their weaknesses, is my job, my art." Reyes stood, a shadow detaching itself from the greater darkness. "Your paperwork, your reassignment will take approximately 6 weeks to process, coincidentally about the same time frame as a certain wedding." She left him with those words, their implication as clear and as cold as a newly sharpened blade. At Harborview Chapel, a place of impending doom, Veronica stood beside Wesley as the officious wedding planner, a woman with a face like a clenched fist, discussed flower arrangements, grotesque displays of wilting blooms and aisle decorations, ribbons like shackles. Her thoughts, however, kept drifting, like a condemned soul, to the pier, to Warren, surrounded by his team, his pack, people who had mourned him, hunted him, who had never stopped looking for him. "Veronica!" Wesley's voice, sharp and impatient, cut through her tormented thoughts. "The planner asked about your preference for the altar arrangement. Do try to focus." "What? Oh, I'm sorry." Veronica forced herself to focus, to play the part of the blushing, compliant bride. Later, as they drove back to Wesley's sterile, soulless condo, he finally addressed the suffocating tension between them, his voice a low, dangerous growl. I saw the way you looked at him, Veronica, Wesley said, his knuckles white, strangling the steering wheel. Who? She feigned innocence, her voice a pathetic squeak. Don't insult my intelligence, Veronica, your Navy SEAL, your resurrected ghost, the one with the convenient memory loss. Warren didn't choose to lose his memory, Wesley, Veronica defended, her voice rising with a desperate, hysterical edge. But you choose to keep running to him, like a bitch in heat, Wesley countered, his voice a venomous snarl. Even now, weeks before our wedding. Veronica stared out the window at the passing, blurred harbor, her vision obscured by unshed tears. I've known him for 3 years, Wesley. 3 years of my goddamn life. Known him? Wesley scoffed, his laughter a harsh, ugly sound. He didn't even know himself until recently. He's a broken, dangerous man. That doesn't make him less real, less human. Wesley pulled into his designated parking space with more force than necessary, the tires screeching in protest. I've been patient, Veronica. God, I've been patient. I've overlooked your unhealthy attachment to that decaying cafe, to this dead-end town, to him. But I need to know, Veronica, are you marrying me or not? This is your last chance. The directness of the question, the raw, brutal ultimatum, struck Veronica like a physical blow. 6 weeks until the wedding, her execution, and only now was she being asked if she truly wanted it. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible, a confession of her own damnation. Wesley's expression hardened into a mask of cold, unforgiving fury. That's not good enough, Veronica. Not anymore. They sat in a tense, suffocating silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations and threats, until Veronica, with a sudden, convulsive movement, removed her ring, Wesley's brand, and placed it on the dashboard, the diamond glittering like a malevolent eye. I need time to think, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Real time. Without pressure, without your ultimatums about Chicago, or selling the cafe, or pretending I don't care about Warren, about what you'll do to him. Keep the ring, Wesley said coldly, his voice like ice. A reminder of what you're throwing away. You have 1 week, Veronica. 1 week to decide what and who you want. After that, I'm moving forward, with or without you, and there will be consequences. Veronica left the ring where she'd placed it, a discarded shackle, and exited the car, her legs unsteady. Instead of entering Wesley's condo, her gilded cage, she began walking, blindly, desperately, toward the harbor, toward the distant, flickering lights of her cafe, her only sanctuary, her only hope. The storm had cleared, leaving the air fresh, cool, and smelling of ozone and impending doom. As Veronica walked, she felt lighter than she had in months, a terrifying, liberating lightness, despite the crushing uncertainty ahead. For the first time since accepting Wesley's proposal, his sentence, she allowed herself to consider what she truly wanted. Not what was expected, not what seemed logical, but what would make her heart, her tormented soul, feel at home, or at least less damned. As Harbor Light Cafe came into view, its windows glowing with a warm, deceptive welcome in the encroaching evening dark, Veronica made her decision. A decision that might save her, or condemn them all. Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes, Commander Elise Reyes announced formally, her voice devoid of warmth, sliding a thick, ominous folder across the polished table. Your official reinstatement paperwork. As of 0800 this morning, you are no longer legally deceased. You are an asset, or a liability. Warren stared at the documents, his name, his service number, the Navy SEAL insignia symbols of a life, a past, he wasn't sure he wanted or deserved to reclaim. After 3 years as a ghost, a hunted man, his identity was restored with surprisingly little ceremony in this small, sterile conference room at the Port Haven Naval Support Facility, a room that felt more like an interrogation cell. Thank you, Commander, he said, his voice steady, betraying none of the maelstrom churning within. Marcus clapped his shoulder, a hard, proprietary gesture. Welcome back to the land of the living, Hayes. Or the damned. The team had remained in Port Haven for 5 tense, agonizing days, ostensibly helping Warren navigate the bureaucratic maze of reclaiming his identity birth certificate, Social Security card, bank accounts that had been frozen, assets seized. The administrative resurrection of Warren Hayes was nearly complete. The psychological one was another matter entirely. "What happens now?" Warren asked, his gaze sweeping across his former team, their faces grim, unreadable. "That's up to you, Commander," Reyes replied, her eyes like chips of ice. "Medically, you've been provisionally cleared for limited, highly monitored duty. Your pension for the past 3 years will be processed retroactively, and your position with the team remains open, should you choose to return, should we choose to have you." Warren ran his fingers over his name on the documents, the ink like a brand. "When would I need to report back, or be eliminated?" "Given the unique circumstances, the Navy has granted you 30 days of reintegration leave," Reyes explained, her voice a silken threat. "After that, a decision would be expected. Your decision, or ours. 30 days, 4 weeks. 4 weeks to decide whether Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the weapon, the asset, would fully replace the man known as Warren, the Ghost, in Port Haven. 4 weeks before Veronica's wedding, her execution. Later, Warren walked with his team along the harbor, a silent, menacing pack. Though ostensibly eager to return to active duty, to the hunt, they had extended their stay, their watchful eyes never leaving him, ostensibly to help him adjust, or to ensure he didn't disappear again. "You're different, Hayes," Natalie observed, her voice a low purr, as they paused to watch the fishing boats, like returning ghosts, disgorge their meager, blood-stained catch. 3 years of homelessness, of being hunted by your own mind will do that," Warren replied, a humorless, predatory smile twisting his lips. "It's not just that." She studied him carefully, her eyes narrowed, assessing. "You seem more at peace somehow, more dangerous, even with everything unsettled." Warren considered this, the thought a cold shard in his mind. When you have nothing, not even your name, your sanity, you learn what actually matters. Survival. Revenge. "And what matters to you now, Hayes?" Marcus asked, his voice a low growl, the question loaded, waiting, an unspoken ultimatum. Before Warren could answer, a familiar voice, fragile and desperate, called his name. They turned, a predatory unit, to see Veronica approaching, her expression a mask of determined terror, despite her obvious nervousness at interrupting their reunion. "Warren, Commander, could I speak with you?" she asked, her gaze darting nervously, fearfully at his team. "Alone?" His teammates exchanged knowing, predatory glances before Marcus spoke, his voice a silken warning. "We'll head back to the hotel. Team dinner at 1900. Debrief. Hayes, if you're free, don't be late." After they departed, their menacing presence lingering like a shroud, Veronica and Warren stood awkwardly at the harbor railing, the silence thick with unspoken words, unspoken fears. "You've been reinstated," Veronica said, her voice barely a whisper, noticing the ominous folder in his hand. Warren nodded, his face a stony mask. "As of this morning, I officially exist again. I'm a weapon, back in their arsenal." "That's wonderful," she said, her smile strained, unconvincing. "Will you be leaving with your team? Disappearing again?" "Not immediately. I have 30 days. To decide, or for them to decide for me." Veronica's relief was palpable, a visible easing of the tension in her shoulders, but brief, quickly replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. "Warren, I need to tell you something. Wesley and I—" "Veronica!" Wesley's voice, sharp as a whip crack, laced with possessive fury, cut through their conversation as he approached rapidly, almost running from the marina parking lot, his face a thundercloud. "I've been calling you for hours. Where the hell have you been?" Warren straightened instinctively, his body language shifting in a heartbeat from civilian, the ghost, to military, the predator, his stance widening, his hands subtly clenching. "I left my phone at the cafe," Veronica explained, her tone cool, defiant, a spark of rebellion in her eyes. "I needed to speak with Warren." Wesley's gaze, cold and calculating, darted between them, his eyes narrowed in suspicion, assessing the threat. "I see. Well, the wedding planner called. There's an issue with the floral delivery for the ceremony. A catastrophe, apparently." "I'm sure you can handle it, Wesley," Veronica replied, her voice surprisingly firm, not moving from Warren's side. a silent declaration of allegiance. Something in her response, in her stance, caused Wesley to reassess the situation, his eyes hardening. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a venomous hiss. "Veronica, we should discuss this privately, now." "Actually, Wesley," Veronica said firmly, her chin high, her eyes blazing with a desperate courage, "I was just telling Warren about our conversation last night, about your ultimatum." Warren remained silent, a coiled spring, sensing the tension between them, the impending explosion, had reached a breaking point. "Was that before or after you left my ring, my goddamn ring, on the dashboard?" Wesley asked sharply, his voice dripping with contempt. Warren's eyes flicked to Veronica's left hand, confirming the absence of the diamond, the brand. Understanding, cold and sharp, dawned slowly. Wesley noticed Warren's reaction and laughed, a harsh, ugly, humorless sound. "She didn't tell you? Your daily charity case, your pathetic stray, has been having second thoughts about our wedding, about her gilded cage." "Wesley, stop it!" Veronica warned, her voice trembling with rage. "Why? Isn't Commander Hayes, your resurrected hero, the reason you've been so distant, so defiant? The convenient memory recovery just weeks before our wedding. How theatrical." "This isn't about Warren, Wesley," Veronica insisted, her voice rising, shrill with desperation. "It's about us, about your expectations, your plans that never included me, what I want." "What you want?" Wesley repeated incredulously, his voice laced with contempt. "I've offered you everything, Veronica. Financial security, a future beyond this decaying town, a life most women would kill for." "But I'm not most women, Wesley," Veronica countered, her voice raw with pain and defiance. "And I never asked for those things. I never asked for you." Warren began to step away, a silent, menacing withdrawal. "I should give you two privacy." "No," Veronica said quickly, her hand darting out, clutching his arm, her touch a brand, a claim. "Please stay." The simple touch, the desperate plea, spoke volumes. Wesley stared at Veronica's hand on Warren's arm, his expression hardening into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "I see," he said coldly, his voice like shards of ice. "So this is why you needed time to think, to make sure your backup plan, your savage, was viable." "That's enough," Warren interjected, his voice calm, but with an underlying current of lethal command that made Wesley flinch. "Whatever is happening between you and Veronica, you owe her more respect than that. Or you'll answer to me." "Stay out of this, Commander," Wesley sneered, his bravado cracking. "You may have rescued hostages, served your country, or slaughtered innocents, but you're interfering in something that doesn't concern you, something you'll regret." "It concerns me when you speak to her that way, Blackwood," Warren replied evenly, his eyes like chips of obsidian. Wesley stepped closer, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Warren's simple, worn clothes, a peacock preening before a wolf. 3 years of breakfast scraps doesn't give you the right to involve yourself in our relationship. She's mine." "Stop it, both of you," Veronica interrupted, her voice cracking, stepping between them, a fragile barrier against the escalating testosterone-fueled aggression. "Wesley, this isn't Warren's fault. These questions, these doubts, they existed long before he remembered who he was, before he remembered his sins." "But they became answers when he did, didn't they, Veronica?" Wesley observed bitterly, his eyes accusing. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't want him." When she didn't immediately, vehemently deny it, Wesley nodded, as if confirming a deeply held, poisonous suspicion. "The wedding is in 5 weeks. You have until the end of the week to make your decision, as we agreed. Choose wisely, Veronica. Your future, and perhaps his, depends on it." With that, he turned on his heel and stalked away, leaving Veronica and Warren standing awkwardly, tensely in his wake, the air thick with unspoken threats and dangerous possibilities. "I'm sorry," Veronica said after a long, charged moment, her voice barely a whisper. "That wasn't how I wanted to tell you." "Tell me what?" Warren asked carefully, his voice a low rumble, his eyes never leaving hers. "That I gave back his ring, that I'm questioning the wedding, that I'm terrified of him." Warren maintained his stoic composure, betraying none of the sudden fierce surge of hope, of possessiveness her words triggered. "Why?" Veronica turned towards the harbor, the churning water a reflection of her inner turmoil, gathering her thoughts, her courage. Last night Wesley asked me directly if I was marrying him or not, if I was his. For the first time I couldn't say yes without hesitation, without terror. Because of me. Warren's question was barely audible, a breath of sound against the vast, indifferent expanse of the harbor. Partly, Veronica admitted, her voice raw with honesty. But also because I realized I've been agreeing to a future I never actually wanted. A gilded cage, selling the cafe, moving to Chicago, becoming someone's corporate wife, someone's possession. Warren joined her at the railing, careful to maintain a sliver of distance between them, a distance that crackled with an almost unbearable tension. What do you want, Veronica? To honor my grandmother's legacy, to stay in Port Haven, to be free. She glanced at him, her eyes filled with a desperate, unspoken question. To marry someone who loves me for who I am, not who they think I could become, someone who doesn't want to own me. What about you? She asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Will you rejoin your team? Become their weapon again? I don't know, Warren confessed, his voice rough with a pain that mirrored her own. They're my family, my pack, the Navy. It was my life, my damnation. But, Veronica prompted when he didn't continue, his silence a heavy weight between them. But that was Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the weapon, the killer. I've been Warren the Ghost for 3 years now. I'm not sure I can go back to being only who I was before. Or if they'd even want me if they knew the whole truth. They stood in a companionable yet charged silence, watching the boats rock gently, deceptively in the harbor. The question of what might or could develop between them, a dangerous, forbidden flower, remained unspoken, yet vibrantly, terrifyingly present in the space between their bodies. I should get back to the cafe, Veronica finally said, her voice strained. Vanessa's handling the lunch rush alone, and Wesley might show up. And I have team dinner tonight, Warren added, his voice flat. Interrogation. They parted without touching, though both felt the magnetic, dangerous pull between them growing stronger, threatening to consume them both. That evening, at the tense, confrontational dinner with his team, Warren was quieter than usual, his thoughts dark and turbulent, clearly elsewhere. Earth to Hayes, Marcus called, his voice sharp, waving a hand before his face. You still with us? Or are you planning your escape? Sorry, Warren said, his focus snapping back, his eyes hard. What were you saying? Marcus exchanged pointed, suspicious glances with the others before asking directly, his voice a low growl. It's the cafe owner, isn't it? Veronica. She's a complication. Warren sighed, knowing denial was pointless, futile, with these people, these predators who knew him so well, who had seen the darkness within him. She returned her fiancé's ring. Low whistles and raised, skeptical eyebrows greeted this revelation. And, Natalie prompted, her voice a silken purr, her eyes narrowed. And nothing, Warren insisted, his voice flat, unconvincing. She's sorting through her own feelings, her own demons. I have no right to complicate that further, to drag her into my hell. Hayes, Derek said seriously, his voice like granite. That woman, she fed you every day for 3 years when you had nothing. When you were a ghost. She saw something in you even when you didn't know yourself. Or she's a fool. Or she's playing you. That was kindness, Warren countered, his voice rough. Or a dangerous misjudgment, not love. James, the youngest, most haunted member of the team, spoke up, his voice surprisingly firm. With respect, sir, I've seen how she looks at you. That's not just kindness. That's obsession. Or terror. And how do you look at her, Hayes? Marcus asked pointedly, his gaze sharp, unwavering, a silent accusation. Warren didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low, certain, and laced with a chilling possessiveness. Like someone who gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing else. Someone I won't let anyone else have. His team exchanged meaningful, predatory glances. You know, Hayes, Natalie said carefully, her voice a deceptive caress. Rejoining the team, it doesn't have to be immediate. You could take extended leave, figure things out, tie up loose ends, or eliminate them. The Navy's been my life since I was 18, Warren reminded them, his voice a low growl. My curse. And it will always be there, Marcus assured him, his voice a silken threat. Waiting. But some opportunities, some targets, they don't wait. The conversation shifted to other, darker topics, but Warren remained thoughtful, his mind a battlefield, weighing options he hadn't previously allowed himself to consider, options that reeked of violence and desperation. The next morning, he met Commander Elise Reyes at the naval facility, a sterile, soulless place, to complete his final damning paperwork. Your team speaks highly of your recovery, she noted, observing him closely, her eyes like chips of ice. Neurologically, there's no reason you couldn't return to active duty after proper retraining, reassimilation. And if I chose not to return immediately? Warren asked, his voice a low challenge. Reyes studied him thoughtfully, a predator assessing its prey. Extended leave could be arranged, possibly a training position, a handler. Your experience would be valuable to new recruits, to shape them, or break them. She slid another document across the desk, this one with a single, staggering figure. Your back pay and benefits, quite substantial after 3 years. You're financially secure, Commander. Your choices are truly your own, or so it would seem. Warren stared at the figure, a king's ransom, thinking of possibilities he hadn't considered when he had nothing, when he was a ghost. Power, influence, revenge. There's something else you should know, Reyes added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your team, they received new deployment orders this morning. They ship out next week. Classified location, minimum 6-month rotation. A suicide mission, some might say. The news settled heavily, a cold weight in Warren's gut. If he rejoined now, he would leave with them. Leave Port Haven. Leave Veronica. Just as she was questioning her engagement, her damnation. Just as she was becoming vulnerable. They wanted me to tell you, Reyes continued, her lips curving into a faint, knowing smile. Said it might factor into your decision, your loyalties. Later that afternoon, Warren walked to Harbor Light Cafe, his mind clearer, colder, more resolute than it had been in days. Through the window, he could see Veronica working behind the counter, her movements fluid, graceful, laughing with customers, a beacon of light in his encroaching darkness. In her element, unaware of the storm gathering around her, the bell jingled as he entered, a death knell. Veronica looked up, her smile, warm and genuine, faltering, then warming again, dangerously when she spotted him. Warren, I didn't expect to see you today. Do you have a minute to talk? He asked, his voice a low rumble, his eyes burning into hers. She nodded, her heart pounding, gesturing to Vanessa, a silent command, to cover the counter before leading him to a quiet, secluded corner table, their usual spot, a place of dangerous intimacy. My team, they received deployment orders, Warren said without preamble, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. They leave next week, for a long time. Veronica's fragile smile faded, her eyes clouding with a sudden sharp pain. And you? Are you going with them? Are you leaving me? I haven't decided, Warren said, his voice a low growl. He took a deep breath, the air thick with unspoken words, unspoken desires. But before I do, I need to know something, Veronica. What? She whispered, her voice trembling. If I stayed in Port Haven, if I didn't leave, would it matter to you? The directness of his question, the raw, brutal honesty, caught Veronica off guard, stealing her breath. She looked down at her ringless left hand, the skin bare, vulnerable. Yes, she admitted softly, her voice a fragile thread. It would matter very much. Warren reached across the table, his fingers, scarred and calloused, brushing hers, sending a jolt of electricity, of forbidden desire through her. I've lived without memories, without identity, without a soul. But these past few months remembering who I am, what I am while being with you that's felt most real, most dangerous. Veronica turned her hand, her fingers twining with his, a silent, desperate confession. What are you saying, Warren? Before he could answer, before he could unleash the torrent of his dark, possessive desire, the cafe door burst open. They both looked up, expecting to see a customer, a mundane interruption. Instead, 4 naval officers, imposing figures in their formal dress whites, their faces grim, unreadable, entered, standing at rigid attention just inside the door, their presence sucking the air from the room. A hush, cold and absolute, fell over the cafe as Marcus stepped forward, his voice a booming, authoritative command. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes," he said formally, his eyes like chips of ice fixed on Warren, then flicking dismissively to Veronica. "We've come to properly thank the woman who saved your life, or perhaps damned it." Grace stared in shock, her heart hammering against her ribs, as all four officers, a phalanx of judgment, approached their table. Natalie, her face a mask of cold, professional detachment, carried a small black velvet box, which she presented to Veronica with a chilling formality. "Miss Sullivan," Natalie began, her voice devoid of warmth, "the United States Navy wishes to formally recognize your humanitarian service to Lieutenant Commander Warren Hayes during his period of memory loss and recovery, your questionable involvement." She opened the box to reveal a civilian service medal, its bronze surface gleaming ominously. "Your consistent kindness provided a stability that proved crucial to his eventual memory recovery and his return to service, or so the official story goes." Tears, hot and stinging, welled in Veronica's eyes as Natalie, her touch cold and impersonal, pinned the medal to her cafe apron, a brand, a warning. The other officers saluted her in perfect, chilling unison, drawing gasps, then a hesitant, confused applause from the cafe patrons who had witnessed the bizarre, unsettling ceremony. "We also wanted to thank you personally, Miss Sullivan," Marcus added, his voice a low growl, his eyes boring into hers. "Hayes is our brother, our weapon. What you did for him, you did for all of us. You returned our property." Veronica wiped away her tears, her hand trembling. "I just fed him breakfast, that's all." "You did more than that," Derek countered, his voice flat, his gaze unnervingly intense. "You saw him when he was invisible to everyone else. You harbored a fugitive. A dangerous man." As the impromptu, unnerving ceremony concluded and the bewildered customers returned to their meals, their whispers like rustling leaves, Warren's team surrounded their table, their presence a suffocating, menacing cage. "We ship out next week, Hayes," Marcus told Warren, his voice a low, proprietary command. "Whatever you decide, we wanted to do this before we left, to stake our claim." The unspoken question, the ultimatum, hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Would Warren be leaving with them? Would he rejoin the pack? He met Veronica's eyes across the table, seeing the same terrified question reflected there, a silent, desperate plea. "I'll let you know my decision tomorrow," Warren promised, his voice a low growl, his gaze never leaving Veronica's, a silent, possessive claim. After his team departed, their menacing presence lingering like a shroud, Veronica and Warren sat in a charged, suffocating silence. "They're your family," Veronica finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your pack." "Yes," Warren agreed, his voice flat. "But sometimes family understands when you need to find your own way, or forge your own damnation." He took her hand again, his touch more certain this time, possessive, dangerous. "I lost 3 years, Veronica. 3 years of my goddamn life. I don't want to lose anything else that matters. Anyone else." Outside the cafe window, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness. Wesley. Watching their clasped hands, his expression unreadable, a mask of cold, calculating fury, before he turned and walked away, disappearing into the encroaching night, a promise of retribution hanging heavy in the air. The next day, Commander Elise Reyes received Warren's decision regarding his future with the Navy, a decision that sent shockwaves through the highest levels of command. That same afternoon, Veronica placed a closed family emergency sign, a desperate lie, on Harbor Light Cafe's door and drove to Wesley's opulent, sterile office for the conversation they both knew was coming. A confrontation, a severing. 5 weeks before what would have been their wedding day, their execution, Veronica Sullivan returned to Harbor Light Cafe, not as a bride Tobe, but as a woman who had finally, desperately chosen her own path, whatever uncertain joy or terrifying damnation it might bring. Veronica's hands, slick with nervous sweat, trembled as she fastened the antique pearl earrings, her grandmother's legacy, to her lobes. The mirror reflected a stranger, a woman she barely recognized, transformed, perhaps damned, by the elegant, deceptively simple white gown and the cascading blood-red veil. "You look beautiful," Vanessa whispered, her voice laced with a fearful awe, adjusting the veil with trembling fingers. "A sacrificial lamb." Veronica met her friend's terrified eyes in the mirror. "I'm terrified." "Cold feet are normal," Vanessa assured her, her voice lacking conviction. "It's not that." Veronica touched the veil lightly, its crimson hue a stark, bloody contrast to the white dress. "I've never been more certain or more terrified about anything. But after everything that's happened, the threats, the darkness," Vanessa squeezed her shoulder, a gesture of desperate solidarity. "The past doesn't matter now, only the future and survival." A soft, hesitant knock interrupted them. Veronica's father, his face a mask of forced composure, peered in, his eyes widening, then clouding with a deep, unspoken fear at the sight of his daughter, his sacrificial lamb. "It's time, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough with a raw, suppressed emotion. "Everyone's waiting." Veronica nodded, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm ready," or as ready as she'd ever be. Harborview Chapel, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking Port Haven's churning Black Harbor, felt more like a mausoleum than a house of worship. Inside, sunlight, weak and watery, streamed through stained glass windows, casting grotesque, colorful patterns across the gathered, apprehensive guests. At the altar, the minister, his face pale and clammy, waited patiently, his eyes darting nervously towards the back of the chapel. The music, a mournful dirge, changed, signaling the bride's arrival. The heavy oak doors at the back of the chapel groaned open as Veronica appeared on her father's arm, a ghost in white, her face hidden by the blood-red veil. Collective gasps, whispers of fear and speculation, rose from the assembly as she began her walk down the aisle, her eyes fixed straight ahead, focused on the abyss. Halfway to the altar, the chapel doors burst open again violently. 4 naval officers, grim-faced sentinels in their stark dress whites, entered silently, their presence radiating a chilling menace as they took up positions at the back of the church, their hands hovering near their sidearms. Veronica faltered momentarily, her step faltering, then continued her steady, doomed progress toward the front. Warren stood at the altar, a wolf in his naval dress uniform, medals gleaming like freshly spilled blood on his chest, watching Veronica approach with an undisguised, predatory hunger. The weeks since his reinstatement, his resurrection, had transformed him, honed him, confident, whole, lethal, a perfect, terrifying blend of Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the weapon, and Warren, the ghost Veronica had known, the demon she had summoned. When she reached him, her father, his hand trembling, placed her hand in Warren's, a transfer of ownership, before stepping aside, his face a mask of despair. Their fingers intertwined, a desperate, possessive grip, as they faced the minister, the executioner, together. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice trembling, "we are gathered here today to witness the unholy union of Veronica Elizabeth Sullivan and Lieutenant Commander Warren Thomas Hayes in matrimony." The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows, though both bride and groom had insisted on writing their own, darker, more binding promises. "Veronica," Warren began, his voice steady, resonant, despite the inferno blazing in his eyes. "3 years ago, I washed ashore a broken damned thing with nothing. No name, no memory, no purpose, only a consuming darkness. But each morning, when you opened that cafe door, a sliver of light in my hell, you gave me something to hold on to, a reason to fight. You saw value in me, a flicker of humanity, when I saw none in myself, only the monster. Today I promise to spend the rest of my life, my eternity, trying to be the man, the protector you believed in, even when I was lost, even when I was your demon." Tears, hot and scalding, glistened in Veronica's eyes as she spoke her vows, her voice a raw, trembling whisper. Warren love isn't just grand gestures or perfect moments. It's showing up, day after day, in small, consistent, desperate ways. It's seeing someone's true self, their darkness and their light, even when they can't see it themselves. You taught me that courage isn't fearlessness. It's moving forward despite the terror, despite the cost. I promise to be your constant harbor, your sanctuary, your home to return to no matter what storms we face, no matter what demons hunt us. As they exchanged rings, ancient tarnished bands that seemed to pulse with a dark energy, the minister, his voice cracking, spoke the traditional proclamation. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Warren lifted Veronica's blood-red veil carefully, his eyes blazing into hers, before drawing her into a fierce, possessive kiss that sealed their unholy union, prompting a stunned silence, then a hesitant, scattered applause throughout the chapel. "Ladies and gentlemen," the minister announced, his voice weak with relief, "I present to you Lieutenant Commander and Mrs. Warren Hayes." As they turned to face their guests, their future, the four naval officers at the back of the chapel, their faces grim, unreadable, saluted in perfect, chilling unison, bringing Warren to automatic, rigid attention. He returned their salute, a silent acknowledgement of their shared, dark bond, before taking Veronica's hand, his grip like iron, and proceeding back down the aisle, a king and his queen, amid cheers, whispers, and the palpable thrum of fear and uncertainty. The die was cast. Their story, a saga of darkness, obsession, and a love forged in the fires of hell, had just begun.